here. We had to switch laptops, but I think we're going to go ahead and begin. So, Mr. Chair, you can go ahead and call the meeting to order.
Okay. Good afternoon. Welcome everyone to the Commission for the Transportation Disadvantaged Business Meeting. We will now call this meeting to order. We're going to ask the Executive Director, David Darm, to do a roll call. We do ask that anybody on the webinar, commissioners, anyone else, please mute when you're not speaking, but remember to unmute when the roll call comes as we're moving forward. We're just information, we're hosting this meeting in person at the Florida Senate in Tallahassee, as well, of course, the Teams meeting here who are not able to attend there in person, including myself. So again, just mute if you're not speaking. So David, you want to go ahead and do a roll call?
Yes, so when I call your name, please unmute your phone and to indicate that you're here by saying here. Chair Stevens.
Here.
Commissioner Knight.
Here.
Commissioner Gray.
Here.
Commissioner Tellez.
Here.
And Commissioner Willingham said he wasn't going to be here, so we have a quorum, Mr. Chair.
All right, perfect. Thanks, David. As you are able, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Give everybody a few moments. And then if you repeat after me, I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, thanks, folks. Just a few introduction to meeting rules. We now ask our commissioners and any advisors to introduce themselves and the agency they represent on the commission. Please remember to unmute your mic and mute as necessary. I'll start out. I'm Phil Stevens. I'm from the Tampa, Florida area. Been in the transportation business my whole career. Sitting here with me is my 22-year-old son, Jared Stevens, who is the reason why I'm on this commission. He's got cerebral palsy and is confined to a wheelchair. And so we're trying to make the world a better place for him so that he can have access. So with that, we can go to Christine Gray, Commissioner Gray.
Good afternoon. Thank you, Commissioner Stevens. My name is Christine Gray. I actually now live in Brevard County. I am a person with a disability, and I have spent the last 20+ years advocating for people with disabilities. I'm really very interested and humbled to be on the commission with you guys, because one of the difficulties that I've had living with cerebral palsy is transportation. And to make everything a little bit more interesting, I have a 10-year-old son who is not disabled, and getting him around can be a challenge for me sometimes. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Gray. Commissioner Knight.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Renee Knight. I'm Vice President of Community Services for ElderSource. I live in the Jacksonville area. I've been on the commission for over about 2.5 years. I have over 26 years experience working with seniors and with senior programs. And as everyone knows, transportation is a key concern and a critical need for our elders in Florida. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Commissioner Knight. Dr. Tellez. Remember to unmute.
Good afternoon, everyone. So happy to be here. I have been working with the commission since 2016. I reside in Miami-Dade County. I am a registered nurse, and I also work in HR as the Director of Nurse Engagement and Retention at Baptist Health South Florida. And the reason why I serve is we have programs that hire persons with disabilities, and transportation has really been a challenge for them. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Dr. Tellez. Any advisors on the phone?
Hi, this is Krista Carter with the Department of Elder Affairs, and I act as the liaison between the department and CTD.
Hey, welcome, Krista.
And this is Kent Carroll with the Agency for Persons with Disabilities.
Welcome, Kit. Any other advisors on the phone or on the webinar?
Also present in the meeting is Rochelle Munson with the Office of Attorney General.
We have Rochelle Munson. Did you all hear that?
Yes, Rochelle's on. Okay. All right, a few meeting rules. This is a public meeting and operates under Florida's Government in the Sunshine Act. This meeting is being recorded, and all verbal, written, and text comments, for example, anything in the chat box, any kind of feedback will be logged within the meeting minutes. We remind and advise commissioners on the webinar to not communicate privately in any way. That includes the chat box with other board members in order to ensure that we are compliant with the Sunshine Law. For the public comment segments, we will follow our usual format. The first public comment segment is intended for agenda items. However, we do welcome public comments on any topic during the second public comment segment in the meeting today. So the first one is a focus on agenda. The second one can be just about anything. We've asked participants intending to speak to submit a public comment form prior to this meeting, and we do have a couple of those already, and indicate whether they are speaking, on the Teams meeting or by phone or what form. We all first call on participants who have submitted the form in advance. And then for participants on the webinar who have not submitted a form and wish to speak, we'll ask you at that point, and we'd ask you indicate in the chat box and or just speak up that you wish to speak, and we'll call on your name after recalling those who have previously submitted the public comment form. We ask that all speakers please identify your name, organization represented, if any, and where you are located in the state, the county. That would help us kind of put you where you are in the state. Speakers for both sessions of public comment are limited to 5 minutes for public comments. We'll now turn it over. If you go to the next slide, we're going to talk about the Microsoft Teams webinar. I don't know if Debbie's on. Can you provide an overview, or is that someone else?
Mr. Chair, I'll go ahead and just to explain. We didn't have again, I apologize for the technical issues. We had trouble last time. We had issues with the GoToMeeting, so we tried Teams today, and we're still working out the kinks. But just to let everyone know, for those of you who are on the webinar, please chat. Look for Deborah Hall, or Elmer Melendez. They are going to be our tech support while the meeting is going on. So if you have issues, please reach out to them and they'll try to work with you while we're having the meeting. Everyone should know, I think by now, about the muting and the unmuting. So those of you who are on and are not speaking, please unmute. For those of you who are in the room, just so I can, for those who are interested in speaking during public comment, we got the podium up here. You guys can just come up and stand over the computer here so that everybody on the webinar can hear you. I think that will be the smoothest way of doing this. And I think that's all I've got on the technical side.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's all we've got for today for the orientation on that piece.
Okay, and just remember, anything you put in the chat box or anything is considered public record. Just a reminder for everyone on Teams. So now let's go to our first public comments segment. We'll now call on speakers who have submitted a public comment form to Director Darm prior to the meeting. As mentioned, we'll only accept comments pertaining to the agenda items during this segment. And then we'll notify speakers when you're 1 minute from reaching your 5-minute limit. And we have 2 comment cards submitted. The first one is Miss Karen Smith from Hillsborough County. Are you online or live, Karen?
I am online. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, this is Karen Smith with Hillsborough County Sunshine Line in Tampa. And I'm here to speak about agenda item 7, which is the application of the data for the trip and equipment grant formulas for the upcoming grant year. Hillsborough County opposes option 2 and requests that the commission approve option 1 instead. Option 2 is well-intentioned and is meant to reduce the impact of COVID-19 on the funding formula. However, the math seems to have not worked out that way. It's actually results in reducing grant funding to counties throughout Florida and redistributes those funds primarily to 3 counties in South Florida: Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach. Based on the chart that's included with the item, nearly dollar for dollar, it reallocates at least $20,000 from 13 counties, including Clay, Escambia, Flagler, Hillsborough, Lake, Nassau, Orange, Osceola, Pasco, Pinellas, St. John's, Seminole, and Sumter, and allocates the resulting $533,000 to those 3 South Florida counties, which I don't really think was the intention of relooking at the way the formula is applied. So for this reason, we request approval of option 1, which we believe more fairly distributes the funds using the new formula. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. Okay, the next speaker card we have is Robert Villar from Miami-Dade DTPW. Robert, are you on?
Yeah, Robert is here. He's coming up to the podium.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Robert Villar, Miami-Dade County Department of Transportation and Public Works, in support of item 7 and the executive director's recommendation of option 2 for the trip and equipment grant. Sorry, Karen.
Okay, thanks, Robert. That's the only 2 cards filled out in advance, correct, David?
That is correct, Mr. Chair. I have not received any other additional public comments at this time.
Okay, at this time, then we will invite other webinar participants to indicate, if you could, in the chat box, raise your hand or indicate that you'd like to speak. Remember to unmute and identify any agencies you represent and the county residents and your name, of course, for the record. I see one hand being raised by Julia Davis. If you want to go ahead.
Hi, good afternoon. I would respectfully request time to check in with, I'm the Senior Transportation Planner, Polk Transportation Planning Organization. I would like a little time amongst me and the Community Transportation Coordinator representatives from Polk County. We haven't had a chance to talk about this agenda item, and I'm concerned that it might affect Polk. And I want to check in with them. I guess I didn't realize you all were voting today. It sounds like you're being asked one last time to vote on this.
Julia, could you identify the agenda item? I'm sorry. Is it item 7?
Sorry. Is it about, if the trip equipment grant item is agenda item number 7, then yes.
About the data, 8 months, 12 months, that discussion. Right?
Yes, that month.
Okay.
The 8
All right.
months,
Thank
12.
you. Thanks. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes. Okay, thank you for asking, but that is the clarification, whether 8 months is better or 12 months is better. I did notice that it affected many of the rural counties, and I'm you know, not everybody's on this phone call. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Julie. Anyone else on the webinar? I don't see any other hands unless you see some, David. Anyone live there with you in the Senate building that wishes to make comment at this on the agenda items?
Right now, I'm not seeing anyone, Mr. Chair, but just in case, there may be some folks on the phone. You may want to tell them to hit *6 just to be safe in case they may not be able to raise their hand on the virtual side. Okay.
Yeah. Great. Yeah. So anybody on that's dialed in via phone, *6, unmute. And well, we have another hand raised, but let's finish the phone call. Anybody on the phone call right now, and then we'll go back to you, Paul. If not, go ahead, Paul. Paul Strobes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Paul Strobes. I'm the Director of Paratransit Services at Broward County Transit. Just wanted to speak in support. We're also in support of option number 2 for item number 7 on the agenda today. Thank you.
All right. Thanks, Paul. Okay, with that, I'm not getting any other hands being raised or anyone speaking up on the call, and there's no one live. So We'll conclude this first public comment section and move forward in the agenda. So the commission convened its business meeting via teleconference on December 15th, prior to the new year. The draft minutes were provided in the CTD Business Meeting package. For commissioners, are there any questions or revisions needed before a vote is taken? Anybody have any questions, comments, concerns about the meeting minutes? If not, I need a motion to approve the minutes, please.
This is Commissioner Tellez. I approve the minutes.
Commissioner Tellez makes a motion. I need a second.
This is Commissioner Knight.
Commissioner Gray, I'll second.
Thank you. Commissioner Knight has seconded. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, great. Thank you. The minutes are approved as shown. Next agenda item is the CTC designation for Volusia County. Commission is, as you know, responsible for designating a community transportation coordinator, a CTC, to arrange transportation disadvantages services in each county in the state. The planning agency is responsible for recommending a CTC for its service area. Today, Stephen Harris, is Stephen or Stephen from River to Sea Transportation Planning Organization, will be presenting their recommendation for the CTC of Volusia County. So is it Stephen or?
It's Stephen.
Stephen, okay, Stephen. Stephen Harris from River to Sea. Go ahead, Stephen.
Okay, thank you. Again, I'm Stephen Harris with River to Sea TPO. I'm a transportation planner, project manager here in Daytona Beach and Volusia County. Since late 1993, Votran has served as the community transportation coordinator for Volusia County. And Votran continues to provide exemplary service, and that's evidenced in their last evaluation that was done in 2021. In your agenda packet, you'll find a letter from Votran where they expressed interest in continuing as the CTC for Volusia County. You'll also find a resolution from the River to Sea TPO in support of their redesignation. You'll also find a letter from the chairperson of the Transportation Disadvantaged Local Coordinating Board in support of Votran's redesignation. In addition, there is a partially executed memorandum of agreement from Volusia County and an authorizing resolution from the county administrator.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. That's it's a lot of accolades there. I'm glad they're doing a good job for you folks. It's pretty strong recommendations there. So, commissioners, are there any questions about this recommendations? Questions, comments? If not, then I need a motion to approve Votran as the CTC designation for Volusia County.
This is Commissioner Knight. I make the motion to approve Votran as the CTC for Volusia County.
Thanks, Commissioner Knight. I need a second.
This is Commissioner Tellez. I second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Tellez. Motion has been made and seconded. All those commissioners in favor of approving Votran as a CTC for Volusia County, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? If not, then the motion passes and Votran is the CTC for Volusia County. All right, thank you. So now, now we just get the next agenda item. As many of you know, the commission redesigned the trip and equipment grant funding formula in Rule 41-2, which began implementation July 1 of 2021, last year. Each variable in the formula is based on data on population, public roads, and the services that were reimbursed under the grant program, the performance variables. Prior to the beginning of the new fiscal year, which will be July 1 of 2022, this commission will need to determine what year or relevant period of data to apply to the funding allocations for fiscal year 22-23. You've heard some of the public comment on that. It's a good conversation to have at this point in time. David Darm, Executive Director, is going to provide an overview of the options being presented so that we're all on the same page with the data. With that, David, you want to go ahead?
Yes. Can you hear me just to check in, Mr. Chair?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so for those of you in the audience, I'm sorry that you can't see the screen. I will be happy to talk with you individually. We will post the PowerPoint on the website so people can follow. I'm going to give a really quick overview just to get everybody, just like the chair said, to get everyone on the same page to understand there's some varying moving pieces of this discussion. And part of that is related to the legislative session that is outside of the control of the commission. We've got to figure out what the final appropriation amount is going to be for the trip and equipment grant, which the legislature is set to resolve by March 11th for sine die. And I want to talk a little bit more about that in the next item. But for the purpose of this item, this relates to the, as the chairman said, the data that we use as a commission, as many of you could recall when we were doing the rule workshops, we anticipated that COVID-19, as well as being the state of Florida, sometimes we have natural disasters that are outside of the control of the CTCs. And as a result of that, we wanted to be sure that the commission had some flexibility to adjust those data sets if there was a pressing matter to do that. So last year, for the first year of this implementation, we had, when we redesigned the formula, when we did our rulemaking, we had a 1-year transition period where our variables were going to be adjusted slightly to allow the systems to transition into the final new formula by July 1, 2022. So even though we started the implementation of the new formula this current fiscal year, starting July 1 of 2021, those variables were adjusted slightly. And in the slide here, you can see it says the first year was the base funding which is the stability funding, was weighted higher at 80%. And also we had performance weight at 15% and the two demand variables each weighed at 2.5%. Now there's something here that is also important to note. We actually lost budget authority, which is getting into the legislative process, but I just want to say, like, a total amount that we distributed as a commission for the year 21-22, the current fiscal year, was actually less in the trip and equipment grant total than it was the previous year. So we distributed a total of $51.1 million for this current fiscal year, which is a decrease, I think, by about $4 or $5 million. In our total appropriation. However, because of the base variable weighted at 80%, a lot of the reductions funding weren't really realized fully because that base variable kind of cushioned the blow a bit. But now we're going into the new fiscal year and we have a $4 million ask on the table. So we're hoping that the allocations that you saw in your spreadsheet in the packet is going to represent, hopefully at the end, a $55.1 million, which, there's still going to be impacts, funding reductions based on what's in the formula and the data. However, having raised the appropriation amount, we won't see quite the same severity of reductions as we would under the 51 million. So that's important to note when we get to the data piece in a second here, know that the appropriation amount isn't resolved yet. So the allocations that you're seeing in the packet are based on what we have to date, and that those numbers will change depending on the outcome of the session. So now we're going into the new fiscal year and we're looking at The base variable is now going to be weighted at 60%, and that is going to be the final amount from July 1 of 2022 and each fiscal year beyond, unless we change the formula again, or the legislature dictates to change the formula again. We are expected to have this be the final form, the final version of what we're going to work with. So base is weighted at 60% and performance is weighted at 30%, and then the two demand variables each at 5. Now, the issue that we're looking at for this action item is really mostly related to the performance data. During the last fiscal year, we applied the fiscal year 18-19 performance data. Now, as you can recall, when we did the change of the formula, remember we used to have the AOR data that we threw out due to its challenges with authenticating that data. And we replaced that with the invoice data that is submitted by the CTC that the commission reimburses for those trips. Those trips are going into now the calculation of the performance variable. Now, I want to make a key distinction on this. We are only counting the trips that were reimbursed under the grant, not trips that were overbilled or overage, as we call it, some of the industry call it, the trips that basically exceeded the allocation amount for that month. Those trips are not included. We did have that as a discussion at a public workshop. We did ask for feedback on it. That at this time is not being considered. In the future, we could revisit a discussion, not necessarily for the invoice piece, but we could have that maybe as a broader discussion. But for the purpose of today and this discussion, we are only focusing on the trips, the miles, and the bus passes that were reimbursed under the trip and equipment grant. Now, the question is the fiscal year data. So last year we used 18-19, which was not impacted by COVID. And we knew that. We even used that in our calculations, if you recall. We did use that 18-19 data because we didn't want to, we were not sure where the COVID impacts were going to be, how they were going to be handled. But we knew this eventually was going to have to come back around as a commission discussion. So now, as you heard, you have varying different points of view. And commissioners, this is really a judgment call on your end. But in essence, what we're looking at is when you see here, this spreadsheet that I have, this table on the chart, and I'm sorry again to the audience members who can't see it. These are the data elements, the years of data for each of the variables, but that performance data is based on, in this case, I used Alachua County as the example. That total number, that was the trips, miles, and bus passes, trips and miles for Alachua County that they were actually reimbursed during the full 12 months of fiscal year 19-20. So that was the 4 months even that were impacted by COVID. Now, when we get to the options now, in terms of, I want to address some of the comments that were made during the public comment, because Karen Smith, she was dead on in terms of what is happening here. And this is a tough decision that y'all have to make because on the one hand, when we look at it, okay, so why one of the reasons why what Karen had mentioned earlier about why we see particularly Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach impacted if we applied only the 8 months. The reason why those 3 counties are looking to gain more in their allocation by only applying those first 8 months, option 2, I'm backtracking here. Option 2, the reason why that is because those systems, when it came to the pandemic, they could not issue bus passes, to my understanding, for the most part. Once the services started kind of shutting down, CARES Act was in the process of coming through. There was pretty much all the transit agencies, to my knowledge, they discontinued charging fares through their fixed route system, which means they could not issue bus passes, which are fare subsidies in essence. There was no fares to subsidize because there were no fares to be charged. So the reasoning why you're finding that those 3 counties particularly are influencing both options get swayed based on those bus passes not being able to be billed during the pandemic, the April, May, and June. And so that is why you're seeing under option 2, the 8 months where you're seeing on one end, the counties like Miami, Broward, and Palm Beach are not having such a severe hit. On the vice versa, on the reverse side of that, when you want to look at it through the option 1 lens, by applying all 12 months, going back to Karen's comment, she's right that with those losses that those 3 big counties get because they didn't bill for those services, that money that they could have gotten goes into the allocations for the other systems that did deliver trips and miles. And if they did do bus passes, then they billed us for it. So when you're looking at it through the lens of the funding, the application of the data, the swings are coming from those trips, miles, and bus passes. If the systems in the counties provided services during those 4 months, then if we applied to option 1, those trips would still be counted. However, that would penalize, option 1 would penalize those systems that could not issue bus passes. Vice versa, option 2 would mean that those systems that did deliver trips don't get credit, so they don't get as much in their allocation. However, you also mitigate the losses onto those bigger systems that couldn't issue bus passes. So that's kind of an overview of where the data question comes into play. From our standpoint, as you know, I'm eating my words. Apparently, I was cited as the one making the recommendation for option 2. The reason for that from my side was because we were trying to maintain a consistency in our point about COVID was outside of the control of our system altogether, but there are good arguments, I think, for both sides to listen to, and that's up to you as commissioners. I also heard Julia's comment about requesting to table that, which is certainly an option you could consider. One thing that I would say is that, we're meeting back in May, we obviously have to get this resolved before the end of the fiscal year. Chances are for the systems, the more time they have to prepare for it, the better. But you don't have to make that decision today if you feel as commissioners that you need some more time and also want to see the outcome of the appropriation piece brought into resolutions. So that's basically the overview, and I will take any questions you all may have about the options that were being presented to you all.
Commissioners, do you have any questions about the data? I do have some comments on this issue once you clarify any of the data questions.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Tellez. I just wanted to make sure that the funding, the numbers that we're seeing do not include the rescue numbers.
That is correct. Very good question, Commissioner Tellez. We do not have the rescue funding accounted for, which is a very important point. The rescue funding, as for those of you who don't know, we issued out some relief funding as part of the trip and equipment grant invoice process. That was funding that was to help the systems not experience such severe reductions, because at the time when we started the pandemic, especially, many of the services had to go down due to safety reasons. So we did not include the rescue funding in this particular, for the purpose of this discussion when it comes to application of data. It is only the trips, miles, and bus passes that were reimbursed for that year 1920.
Dr. Tellez, does that answer your question?
Yes, it did. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Any other commissioners have any questions on the data being presented? If not, I guess I'll make some general comments if that's appropriate at this time. One, just based on some of the discussions we've had over the last few weeks, the process, the formula was approved by legislature and the governor's office. And so the 80 to 60%, those types of discussions are, the process is the process. It was approved. And so I don't want to confuse and bring into those issues into the discussion. And then the second point being that data is relevant. Always, as a scientist, I'm always a little cautious of excluding data. in any way, shape, or form. And I know the pandemic has, changed our perspectives on things. It's no one on this call's fault that any of that happened, but it did. So that the data is the data. And I also want to give recognition because during COVID, during the pandemic, there were a lot of counties and agencies providing services. And I think that's worthy of recognition that they continue to provide services, throughout the pandemic. And so I think that's important to realize. And the next point being that the schedule allows us, with the session being currently in and not knowing quite the dollars and cents coming out of that, we have a meeting in May 24th. Julia, there are counties that are asking for additional time to look at the impacts of these two options that we're discussing with the data, 8 months versus 12 months. So the schedule provides that accommodation that we could do that. And so based on all those factors, I don't know, if we would need to vote on this today. I guess I'm in favor of tabling the motion until the May 24th, which would give us time to have the conversation with other counties, find out comes out of legislature, recast the numbers, have a more accurate discussion on this topic. But I mean, that's my kind of personal opinion on it. And I did want to roll call the commissioners to see how they felt about it. I mean, I guess I don't see the sense of urgency to vote on it today when we have time to make a better decision in a couple of months. Commissioner Gray, how do you feel about it? I'm just trying to get opinion here. So we're not voting on anything right now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, it took me a minute to unmute. I wanted to make sure. I agree with you. I think we'd be okay to table it for now until we had more data. I'm more of a social scientist myself as well.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Knight, what's your personal opinion on it?
I agree on tabling it. We will have the numbers from the legislature, so we'll have a true idea of what our funding is at that time. So if that's possible, let's table it.
Okay. Thank you. Dr. Tellez.
Yes, I would also like to table it. I think we have time. We can have a more accurate discussion once we know what's coming out of the legislature.
Okay, thank you. And again, I wasn't trying to, unduly influence anyone, but if we don't have to make the decision, I hear different voices, and so I want to make sure that we listen to the folks who are providing the services. I mean, that's really important for us here on the commission. So with that, I know this is an action item, but I would need a motion to table this action item from the commission.
Commissioner Stevens, I'll make the motion to table the action item for the next meeting.
Thank you. Do I have a second on that motion?
This is Commissioner Tellez, and I also will second that motion.
Thank you, Dr. Tellez. We have a motion on the table. A motion to table this agenda item until the May 24th meeting, with the understanding that the decision have to be made at that point in time due to the schedule constraints at that point in time. It has been seconded by Dr. Tellez. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed to tabling this? If not, then the motion to table this agenda item carries. We will hit it head on the May 24th. And that time period, I would like, and David, we can have a discussion. I would like to make sure that all the counties have an opportunity to give us their feedback on the two options, and we can figure out how that dissemination strategy may work to make sure that we can, get the feedback, and folks like Julia has an opportunity to talk to her constituents and her users and CTCs and that sort of thing. We do have some time, but we got to get on it. So I just want to make sure that everybody's good with that. So that completes the action items. We'll now move to the legislative update and the executive director report. David will now address that. David, so go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And we'll get just one last thing to make a note of. I'll get with our team to being sure that we look at our timeline for executing grants if we have to meet earlier than May 24th for a quick discussion and vote on that particular item. We can talk about it, but I'm not sure yet. We can just talk through those pieces internally and get back with y'all. But the main thing is that now I think everyone knows the decision that we have to make as a group on this matter, and getting the information. I liked what you said, Mr. Chair, getting the information time to resonate with all the stakeholders so that they have ample time to comment on it if they so choose. Now, onto the legislative side, I've talked a lot about this already, I think, but I'll just give a quick overview for those of you who are not involved in the last few events that we've had. We had TD Day today, had a really pretty good turnout for the circumstances, given that some people were a little nervous about COVID. And we had a big message today that we wanted to give out to our advocates, our stakeholders. We've got a $10 million ask on the table. Okay. Now, I want to clarify for those of you who are not familiar with the legislative process. There is something called budget authority versus what is actual revenue. And I'm going to get to that in a second. But for the purpose of our ask and anybody who is meeting with members, their staff, or talking with anybody involved in the legislative process, I want to be absolutely clear. We're asking for additional budget authority, meaning we want that authority to spend money that we already have. Remember that the commission administers a trust fund. So that means that there's dedicated revenue that comes in throughout the year, largely through those license tag renewals that we get, that you all have to do when you renew your vehicle. Those revenues will come in through, periodically throughout the year. And then we need the legislature to give us the authority. Think of the trust fund like your bank account. You get income through your bank, but you need the bank to basically authorize you to make a purchase. In this case, the legislature is the bank. They authorize us to distribute the amount that we can distribute to each of the CTCs and planning agencies with our grant programs. I'm almost done, Ranger. Sorry, my Ranger here is standing behind me groaning, telling me to hurry it up. So I'm trying my best I can. So that $10 million ask, we have two specific issues on the table. We have, of that 10 million, 4 million of that, which is our priority, is to be additional budget authority going to the trip and equipment grant, which we just talked about. So 55.1 million is ideally what we would like, versus 51 million, which is what we distributed this year. So if we could get that, that would certainly help in terms of addressing some of the reductions that we're seeing, projections, should I say, to the formula because of that changing of the base variable. So that's our priority. And then the second ask is a $6 million similar funding that we did in the past through the Innovation and Service Development Grant Program. And the idea of that would be basically just continuing our efforts to try to test new services, testing new ways of either doing on-demand, increasing access to a specific group in the TD population, like the developmental disability community. There's a lot of emphasis on regional cross-county transportation. So we are watching that process closely. Because this is going to come into play in the spring. If we do get that money in the final budget, that means then we're going to have to begin hitting the ground running on our application process for that particular grant program. So as it stands today, the House and Senate, neither proposal includes the 4 million asked for the trip and equipment grant, which is the big concern for us because of those, what we just talked about with those allocations changing. So that is number one concern for us, but we are meeting. I'm very appreciative of the folks that have already gotten a chance to meet with their members to talk about that issue. I have been talking with the legislative staff, reaching out to them and trying to clarify what that ask entails. But in essence, that money would be used with existing revenues, existing funds that come into the trust fund. Okay, not new revenues, not general revenue, not coming from another trust fund. This is strictly coming through what is dedicated already. Okay. Then the $6 million ask is been picked up by the Senate. So the Senate's proposal has the $6 million for the innovation. The House does not have that proposal in there. So of course we want that the House to reflect similarly what the Senate has. In addition, the Senate includes proviso language, which is basically like statute. It's basically tells us, the commission, how we can use that money in more specific ways. It includes some specific proviso. One, it says that the county can only receive funding for one project. So we've had in the past, we had funded multiple projects, for example, in Pinellas and St. Lucie. We funded, I think, about 2 to 3 in each of those counties. So if that proviso is reflected in the General Appropriations Act, we as the commission would only be authorized to award one grant project per CTC or per applicant. Okay. Number 2, the proviso for the Senate includes some caps on the funding amounts. So we have $6 million, which is a small pot of money if you look at it on the big scheme of things. So these caps are meant to try to keep some fairness for other systems to compete for that money. So in that, there's cap for a $750,000 cap for an individual county project. So that would be maybe on demand, maybe access to for a specific group. And it also has a $1.5 million cap on a regional cross-county mobility project. So if there's multiple CTCs working together on a project, they could apply with one applicant being the lead, could be able to apply for up to 1.5 million and the Senate's proviso. So lots to figure out here. We're obviously going to keep monitoring this, and it's going to determine what we do as a commission going into the spring if it does get picked up. I anticipate, and I'll get into this in a second, but we'll have workshops on that issue, and we're going to have some more discussion. So please don't fret just yet. We're not going to leave you with just that info. We're going to give you more details later. But before I get to that other updates, I did want to go back to the second about this authority versus revenue, because this is really important. This is something I've learned in my role over the last few weeks that was really, really a big insight. And I think that a lot of people, and I say this across the system, from the legislative level all the way through our system, do not quite understand how our trust fund works. And that's not their fault. It's just, it is complicated. Budget process is not necessarily as fun as maybe the policy side of it, if you, like me, think that's fun. But I still think it's important that we get at least a basic understanding of this going forward. If you look at this chart here, and for those of you who are in the audience, this is what I'm showing, the table that is on that flyer that you all seen, I think. We have a garnet and gold to do a little shout out to some of our staff members who wanted to have FSU colors represented on this. No names mentioned, but I was one of them too, so I was proud of it. Garnet and gold. The garnet represents budget authority, meaning what the legislature authorizes us to spend, and the gold represents the actual money, gold or green if you want to look at it that way, that comes in, revenues that come into the trust fund. So each of these fiscal years represented here, you can see the revenues amounts have changed periodically, but they've gradually gone up. And on the budget authority side, it has gone down. And by the way, I want to be clear, this does not include the multi-use corridors of regional economic significance funding that we got from 1920 and 2021. That funding has been repealed. It is no longer relevant to any of the discussions that we're having. So that is gone. Do not, if you're looking for that number, that is not in here. This is simply just what we've got in budget authority with the existing grant programs that we have now and comparing that to the revenues. All we are asking for this session, at the end of the day, the bottom line is that we want that red to go up higher so we can spend that gold, that being able to distribute the revenues that we already have coming in and projected to come in into the trust fund. So I think this was a very important session despite the challenges that we're facing. It really has taught us a lot. It's taught me a lot personally. And I believe that this is going to be a really good discussion going into the future about understanding how our funding works. And then, of course, how it gets into play with the formula. And then even beyond the formula, there are other components to this that I don't want to get into right now, but I'm going to just tease you a little bit and say that we're probably going to have some more workshops and some more real in-depth dialogue. So stay tuned for some more to come. In the meantime, I wanted to give you guys, go ahead.
I want to make sure you restate the bottom line there.
Yes.
We need to increase our budget authority so that we can distribute these funds to the service providers around the state. So that's the ask of
yes.
People on the call, people involved in the industry. That's the big ask there, because we have the projections coming in that exceed our budget authority. And so we cannot distribute those funds beyond our budget authority.
That's right. Yep. Thank you. That is exactly what the issue comes down to. And honestly, I think that more and more people, as they get to see this chart, and we're very thankful. We had a few that already met with some members today, some of our stakeholders at the that came up to Tallahassee, met with their local delegations. And I think that just based on the initial feedback, I'm hearing some positive feedback, because there was just confusion over this. And it's confusing. The budget process is not for the faint of heart. But what you just said, Chair Stevens, is the bottom line. And once people, I think, understand that, it's a little bit easier to grasp. It's just getting the time to sit down and really understand it and explain it in an easy way. So I hope that for all of you who are not engaged, not as familiar with this process, at least learn something new today. All right, a few other updates I want to give you all. Again, we're very appreciative of the TD Day event today. We had a good turnout. It wasn't our biggest turnout, but it was a very effective turnout, if I do say so myself. Had some good speakers. We had Senator Gibson and Senator Osley, Secretary Tebow. We also are very appreciative of our partners with Florida Public Transportation Association, who helped us facilitate this event, getting registrations. So it was overall a really good event. And I think especially given the news of what we were dealing with on the budget side, it really reinforced why the importance of having TD Day, and perhaps even maybe going into the future, messaging a little bit better at the beginning or earlier in the process. So lots of lessons learned from this year's event. But overall, I want to just say I'm very proud of everybody who's been involved. I'm very proud of our team for the hard work they did. They were up at 6 this morning, or up earlier than 6. They came to the Capitol at 6 to set up. And so there's been a lot of hard work that went into this event, and I just want to recognize them. I also wanted to let you all know we've got some workshops coming up. We haven't set the dates yet, and we still got to work out some of the details, but I wanted to go ahead and put it on your radar. Number one, as I mentioned earlier, we have the innovation grant funding that is right now going through the legislative process. If that does get picked up in the final General Appropriations Act, we will plan to have a workshop and announcement of the application process. We're going to try to do the best we can to meet some of these questions. We're going to take a little bit more proactive efforts to help the systems in terms of understanding the expectations of this grant and pushing our systems to come up with the best ideas. So that is really going to be a really important discussion. I suspect we'll probably have mid-March once we get through close to the end of session. We've also got this issue regarding the annual operating report, AOR, and a redesign now. Commissioner Knight is chairing that group, and we've been meeting a few weeks now. We've got some insights that we're working on about potentially how we can improve the authenticating of that data, especially as it relates to what the CTCs actually have control over. So we're going to have a workshop eventually on that issue. I suspect that one would probably be a little bit further out, probably April timeframe. because the innovation grant's a little more pressing. But the AOR redesign is going to be a big topic, big topic. In fact, I think it's going to spill over into a broader discussion about defining our purpose, and I'm going to get to that in a minute. And then lastly, as far as another workshop, well, this actually gets into what I was just going to say. This is going to probably be something we need to work out in more detail. But what I would like to do is have a vision summit when we get our new commissioners on, which I suspect will be within the next month or two. We still got to go through, we got to wait on the governor's office and reviewing the applications. But I know we are set to be getting new commissioners relatively soon. And once that happens, we want to have a vision summit. We did this a few years ago for our commissioners, but I think it would be beneficial to have this broadened to not just to the new commissioners, but also to our advisors. We got Rochelle Munson here for the first time in person. She's really interested in learning about our program. We're going to have new staff eventually. We want them to learn about our program. We also have stakeholders that have been around for a long time, but could use a good refresher and start identifying what do we want to do going into the future? What do we want to see the TD program expand upon? I believe that 2022 is going to be a really good year for us. I think this is going to be the season that we're experiencing a renaissance of the TD program and redefining its mission, redefining the way we view our mission. So there's a lot more to come, but I would say to leave you with a theme to begin thinking about for everybody who is engaged in this process. The theme of this year is going to be growth. And the reason why that is, we have a state that's growing, we have a population and need that's growing with older adults getting older and living longer, which is a great thing, means they're also more likely to need services. We also got more people moving to the state of Florida, and we also see the revenues are going up. So growth is a theme that I'm seeing throughout the whole landscape. But more importantly, I want us as a system to embrace growth of ourselves. And I mean that both individually in terms of personal development and knowledge gained and being more effective in our roles, each of our individual roles, but also the development of us as a system. How can we expand knowledge and understanding about all these various issues like the funding formula, how it works, how does the other funding sources come into play, how do the CTCs coordinate with those? There are so many opportunities to explore innovation and better ways, better efficient ways and effective ways to doing our business. And I'm really excited about this. I can't talk enough about this as with my own team. And I want to branch that out beyond just our individual office and bring that conversation to you all somewhere in the very near future. So that's kind of an overview of sort of looking at some of the big events that we're going to come up with. One last thing I want to update y'all on is the Writers and Stakeholder Relations Subcommittee that Commissioner Gray chairs. We have met. We have kind of had to put a pause on that group for a few months because of everything going on with legislative session. But also, we're working with our colleagues in the Department of Transportation to help us think of a communication strategy on broadening the awareness of our program. And eventually, once we get that, once we start kind of developing an internal starting point of strategy, we want to bring that to the subcommittee, to Commissioner Gray will be involved in these discussions and those members. But eventually what we'd like to do is as once the subcommittee and us internally kind of have an idea of what we want organizationally, we'll bring that to the commission. We'll also want to share that those ideas with the broader system, because I know many of you CTCs out there and planners too, I'm sure, have events, do your own various types of communication, marketing, and we want to be able to promote those. If it's, supporting the mission of the TD program, we want to be able to ride that coattail of that of those advertising events. as well as vice versa. We want you to take our stuff that we're doing and the innovations and the initiatives that we're taking on. We want you to spread the word and get connected, get connections built with other partnerships. And all that kind of ties to communication. All that ties to being able that we all have kind of a seamless way of getting that information out to the world. So there's a lot more to come on that. I will stop from that side if you have any questions to me or Commissioner Knight or Commissioner Gray. I know I cited y'all's work, but if you have anything you would like to add as far as your pieces of your sort of oversight to these two initiatives, you know, feel free to add in. But that concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thanks, David. Any commissioners, any comments from the commissioners on the report?
This is Commissioner Knight. David summed it up. I'm excited to be on the AOR redesign workshop or committee. So looking forward to it. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, and it's incumbent upon us as a commission, as Florida grows and changes, that we remain flexible. So these committees, these subcommittees are important for us to, you know, figure out what and if we need to change things and how to properly represent the population of Florida as we move forward. So thank you for that. So the next part of the agenda, we will move to commissioner and advisor reports. Are there, first of all, any commissioners that have a report they would like to make? If not, any advisors on the call, on the meeting, in the meeting today? If not, then we will move to the next agenda item, which is the second public comments segment and closing remarks. We'll now hold a second public comments segment of the agenda. Speakers are welcome to discuss any topic, whether they're on the agenda or not. Again, you're limited to 5 minutes. And I did want to recognize Paul Strobus, Broward County, did make a comment in the chat box. And if I misrepresented that, Paul, I apologize, but recognize that Broward during the pandemic, you know, nobody ceased services. I didn't mean to imply that in any way, but they did discontinue fares, and the counties in those cases typically absorb those costs. So I just wanted to recognize that that, you know, that point, Paul. Thanks for clarifying that you know, Broward County nor any county did they just, you know, cut services. It was just a matter of the discontinued fares that occurred during that period. So. Thanks for clarifying that. David, do we have any other comment cards at this point in time submitted prior to the?
He just unless Paul had something else to add in his public comment, I don't think we have any other. I don't think we have any other public comments. At least I'm not seeing any. Okay, thanks. And I was going to call on Paul. I just wanted to see if we had any cards submitted. So that with anybody in the meeting on Teams meeting, Paul, I see your hands up. You want to go ahead and make your comment?
Yes, thank you. Again, this is Paul Strobus. I'm the Director of Paratransit for Broward County. Just as a follow-up on the action for item 7, to understand the impact to some of us, and David made mention to it, so I just wanted to illustrate. My budget for next fiscal year is due end of April, and we're constitutionally required to advertise our county budget July 15th. And so by delaying this vote till May 24th, potentially, has an impact on us being able to have our budget ready for our own process here in Broward County. And with respect to the timing of the trip and equipment grant, my final board meeting before summer recess is June 21st. And if you wait until May 24th to make the determination of option 1, option 2, I've already missed the deadline to run the process for a trip and equipment grant. So hopefully the staff, David and his folks, can take that into consideration, because we really need the decision sooner than later and May 24th for me is much too late for me to submit my operating budget for FY23 and to be able to process a trip and equipment grant in less than, 35 days or whatever, being that I've already missed that board meeting. So I just wanted on the record to explain what your tabling that item impact has potentially, and hopefully that can be addressed sooner than later.
Sure, and thanks, Paul. That's good clarifying. And I think David had alluded to the fact that if we need to have a meeting sooner than that for this specific agenda item, we can do that. That's not a problem. I do think it's important to understand what some of those deadlines from some of the counties may be, moving forward. It's just there's a lot of data going to be coming in the next 30 days. So if we had that opportunity to collect that data, I think we'd make a better decision and still comply with your deadlines moving forward, which, we understand there's deadlines everybody's got to apply to in board meetings and everything else, like you mentioned. So I think we can accommodate all that. I just felt like if we had another 30, 60 days, let's use it, and make the best decision based on the best available information. So thank you for that comment. Anyone else in the meeting today, either live or webinar, have a public comment at this point in time? If not, then this will conclude our public comment segment, portion number 2. And this concludes our business.
Yeah, hold on, Mr. Chair, we have one more.
Oh, I'm sorry, Julia, go ahead.
Julia Davis. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Davis.
Just really quickly, and to let consensus go, I respect what Paul is saying about his advertising and scheduling deadlines, and a month works for my purposes. Even just a week works for my purposes. But I am concerned that the other smaller counties might not be aware that this is percolating, and you all need time to get the message out to them and give them time to think. So I thank you. Even a month is good for me.
Okay. Thanks, Julia. And like I said, we will work towards getting the information out, and then hopefully all the counties could communicate any kind of deadlines. I mean, we obviously can't comply with every county's, internal deadlines, but we'll try to do the best we can with making the best decision based on the best available information at the time. So any other comments at this time? Public comments? I'm looking for hands. I don't see it.
That's if you want to go ahead and also try the phones for *6 in case.
Yeah. Anybody on the phone, remember you got to hit *6 to unmute, or otherwise we won't hear you. Hit *6. You have public comment. We've got a few folks on the phone, 3 or 4. With that, then this will conclude our business meeting today. We want to thank everyone who participated both in the legislative awareness days and the business meeting, and who, quite honestly, are digging into the agenda and providing us meaningful comments and feedback on our agenda items. That gives us the information to make the best decisions. So we appreciate, folks speaking up and telling us what's relevant, what's important to them, and they're part of the state. We'll hold our next commission meeting in Stuart, Florida on May 24th. We mentioned that earlier. We'll also send out any announcements on other upcoming events. If we have an additional meeting between now and May 24th, we'll of course notice that as well. With that, I need a motion to adjourn the meeting.
This is Commissioner Knight. I make the motion to end the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Knight. Can I have a second for that, please?
This is Commissioner Tellez. I second that motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Dr. Tellez. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Aye.
This meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you, everybody, for your time, and stay safe out there. Thanks. Bye-bye.